Maybe I could take a little break on the Hamlins, just a tiny little break on the Hamlins, so that I can focus on my mother's side of the family. And oh boy, what I have found thus far, we'll get into it. So let's jump into my mom's side of the family again. Now, there was rumor growing up that we were unclear of who my mother's father was. It was a possibility that it was between one or two men. Those two men are Willie Garner and a Booker T. Mills. I wanted to see if I could figure that out with genealogy, records, and DNA. I took the DNA test, my mother took the DNA test, and it was time to just, get more curious about who is the man that my mother descends from, that my grandmother descends from. The first thing that I did was ask questions. Again, talk to your elders. Some of the most accurate information that you can possibly get is directly from your elders. Even if their information is a bit choppy, you can read through the lines to be able to put pieces together, okay? The eldest living person in my family on that side is my Aunt Margaret, that I know, that I'm aware of. So I was told that Willie Garner, he passed away about 1968. My mom remembers attending his funeral. My mom and her cousins, they grew up with the understanding that that was their grandfather. They did not learn until they were about in their 30s or 40s that it was a possibility that Booker T. Mills could be their grandfather. Aunt Margaret told me that Booker T. Mills died when she was a very little girl. Now, my Aunt Margaret was born in about 1940, and she says she wasn't even 4 years old by the time Booker T. Mills passed away. Started to research Booker T. Mills in the area of South Carolina. Like, let me not narrow it to a county just yet. Let me just look in the area of the state of South Carolina. And I found at least one, a Booker T. Mills from Darlington, who died from a very young age. He was only in his mid-30s, and he died in 1943, in April of 1943, which would have been just a few months before my grandmother was born. So that means that there's a possibility that he is her father, being that he was alive during the time of her conception. This is what I found on this Booker T. Mills, who died in 1943. Not a lot of information, but I found a death certificate, I found some siblings, and I found potential parents. Okay? But not a lot of information outside of the 1940 census, where he's listed with my great-grandmother and her first daughter, Emma. So then I decided, okay, well, I can't really find much left here. Let me see if I can find anything on Willie Garner. For some reason, I could not find almost essentially any information on Willie Garner at all. And when I was asking my Aunt Margaret about him, she told me that he ended up going to jail. He worked on the chain gang, and he was there for quite some time. But that's the only significant thing that I could really get out of her about him. I didn't really get a lot of information on him verbally or through my own research. So Willie Garner is a little bit of a mystery. I decided to look through my DNA matches. Maybe there are some family trees of matches that can help me put some pieces together. Now, before I tell you my findings, this is the information that you need to know. There's 3 sisters. My grandmother Mary Louise, my Aunt Margaret, and my Aunt Emma. Now, there are DNA tests on Ancestry for the descendants of all 3 sisters. Me and my mother for Mary Louise, one of my cousins for my Aunt Margaret, and another 3 of my cousins for Aunt Emma. So it kind of worked out. All 3 of the girls ended up having DNA descendants who took the DNA test, and it worked out in our favor. So I decided, let me look up the last name Mills in the public trees of my DNA matches. I found some Mills. I did not find Garner at all. And then I started looking at the shared matches amongst me and my DNA matches. And this is where things got interesting. So I saw that me, my mother, and one of my cousins are considered full-blood relatives. And our other cousins are considered half. And when I started researching the shared matches in their trees and the names Mills and Garner, for one of the sisters' descendants, I found Garner. For the other 2, I found Mills. That means that this is the conclusion that I came to based off the DNA analysis. My Aunt Emma, her father was Willie Garner. My grandmother, Mary, and my Aunt Margaret share the same father, Booker T. Mills. When looking through my DNA matches, I found one in particular who had a public tree, a vast public tree with a lot of Mills. And I analyzed our DNA connection. I looked through through their family tree, and I found a Booker Teleferio Mills. And there was a picture. Before I even dropped the photo, I looked at this man's records, and I looked at I did comparisons from the stories that I've heard, the records I was able to find, DNA match analysis, and now this new person. This Booker T. Mills that I found was not from South Carolina, was actually from North Carolina, a city in North Carolina only 2 hours away from Darlington, South Carolina. Okay, which means travel was possible. It wasn't impossible, but travel was possible. So there's a Booker T. Mills listed with my great-grandmother, Mary Lou, on the 1940 census with her daughter, Emma. And this Booker T. Mills is also listed in the 1940 census in the city in North Carolina that he is from. I looked at the dates that these census records were taken, and they're 2 weeks apart. So it's very possible for a person for this Booker T. Mills to have been counted in his county in North Carolina, as well as the county with my great-grandmother. This is where things get a little dicey. When I tried to figure out the Booker T. Mills that I was told about growing up, him dying young and dying before my grandmother was born, the death certificate that I found, the Booker T. Mills that I was looking up based off of that information, I could not find an obituary at all. I could not find anything in the newspapers. I could not find anything on findagrave.com, nothing. I only saw the death certificate, but I did not see anything else surrounding the death of this person. There was only one thing that I found. There was a Booker T. Mills in about September of 1943. Mind you, the Booker T. Mills I was told about growing up potentially died in about April of 1943. But in September of 1943, there was a Booker T. Mills in the newspaper who was summoned to be a part of the armed forces. And it listed all of the men, him included, who are being called to service. That's it. But mind you, this was after the death date listed on the death certificate that I found of a Booker T. Mills from the same county as my grandmother. Dug a little bit deeper into the Booker T. Mills that I found in the DNA matches tree, and still trying to make comparisons, I found that on every census record, he counted himself as never married, very specifically never married. There's only a few options that were given to people on the census records: married, divorced, widowed, single, right? Even separated by the time the 1950 census came around, but not never married. On every single census record I found for this Booker T. Mills, he lists himself as an EV, never married. However, as I deep dived, I found multiple marriage certificates for a Booker Teleferio Mills across the southern eastern seaboard.